Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in Volume 1, Chapter 24. This is titled Misunderstandings of the Teachings. There's various misunderstandings that you're going to see in the world about the teachings of the Buddha, and over the last 6.5 months or so, I've been sharing with students what the teachings of the Buddha are. And that's helping you to be able to understand his teachings to guide you to this enlightened mental state. But now at the very end of the book, I share misunderstandings that you're going to encounter at different times. This is in an effort to be able to help you see more clearly what the path to enlightenment is. So once you've learned the teachings for this period of time, now we can start talking about some of the misunderstandings that you're going to see in the world, and this will help you to better make your way towards the enlightened mental state. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. I'm going to start with meditation, and then afterwards I'm going to move into this talk on chapter 24, helping you to understand these 9 very common misunderstandings. There's other misunderstandings in the world too, but these are the 9 biggest ones that you're going to see in a lot of different places in the world. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I do this is I start with chanting to ease us into the meditation. I'm going to provide some guidance. There's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to take a position, either seated, lying, or standing, these work really well for online learning. There is a walking position that's very helpful for you to be able to learn, but it just doesn't work so well with online learning. So feel free to take whatever position you're comfortable with, and you're welcome to even join along in the chanting if you like. Then I'll come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Potang Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakawato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakatoro Kawitu Anuttaro purisa dhamma sati satatavap manusanam Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวาพุทธังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาเควตาตัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาควาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys in our class today. Nice to see everybody here, whether you're joining in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Welcome to everyone. Maybe you're even listening to this on the replay. As I mentioned, I've been spending the last 6.5 months or so in this iteration of the group learning program, helping students to understand what the teachings of the Buddha are, helping you to understand the path to enlightenment. And now, here at the end of our group learning program, we're not quite all the way at the end, but towards the end of this program, I share in this chapter 9 misunderstandings of Gotama Buddha's teachings, because you're going to see many, many different misunderstandings of his teachings. And if you've been learning based in the original words of the Buddha, and you go out to any particular community in the Buddhist world, you might see things that are exactly the opposite of what I've been teaching you. And if you've been learning with the original words of the Buddha, you'll know that those things are not his actual teachings, because the vast majority of the world doesn't actually study with the original words of the Buddha. That's unfathomable for somebody to imagine that you would consider yourself on the path to enlightenment or practicing Buddhism if you weren't actually studying with the original words of the Buddha. But that's what the vast majority of the world is doing. There's about 500 million people who consider themselves Buddhist practitioners, but it's a very, very, very minute number of individuals who are actually studying with the original words of the Buddha. This all started back during the lifetime of the Buddha. Over 2,500 years ago, everything he spoke and taught was done orally, because their technology to write things down didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he spoke orally, and that's how his students actually learned his teachings. And that's where chanting came along in order to help people remember his teachings and commit them to memory. And if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there were countless people around him, some that were practicing really, really closely and that were learning and growing and developing and making their way to enlightenment. And then there were people on the outer fringes who were also learning, but they didn't quite understand the teachings. And so during his lifetime, while everything was spoken orally, and there was definitely a core group of people that understood the teachings really well and were getting to enlightenment, those individuals ultimately documented the teachings shortly after the death of the Buddha. That the technology to write things down made its way to that region of the world, and they were able to start documenting his teachings. But there were still countless other people who weren't getting to enlightenment, who weren't studying the teachings very closely, who weren't understanding what the Buddha actually taught. And because of this oral tradition, even though things were written down shortly after his death, it really precipitates even to today. Even today, there's a vast array of oral tradition out there in the world. And with an oral tradition, it's very easy for things to be inadvertently changed about the teachings of the Buddha. Or in some cases, people have overtly changed the teachings of the Buddha. Even though during his lifetime, he cautioned against changing his teachings and explained the harm that it would cause to yourself and to other people if you changed his actual teachings. Nonetheless, there were people who did that overtly or inadvertently because maybe they just didn't even study his original words to even know how harmful it is. Because a Buddha gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So essentially, what a Buddha is doing during their lifetime is they're putting down lights along the path, making it as clear as possible that they're illuminating this path for people to be able to experience enlightenment and know how to get to enlightenment. But as time goes on, impermanence affects those teachings. And it's like people are knocking over those lights and making it more and more difficult for other people to be able to see the path. But by you going back to the original words of the Buddha and not believing anything related to his teachings, not believing me, not believing books, not believing any of these things, you can actually see what are the actual teachings of the Buddha through learning, examining, and investigating what's being shared with you, through reflecting on that to independently verify it, and then practicing it, integrating it into your life, and actively training your mind. This is what's going to help you to be able to sort through the misunderstandings and ensure that you're not being misled. Because as an individual is on the path to enlightenment, they're not a follower, they're not a devotee or anything like that. Instead, they're an independent practitioner who's working towards the development of their own mind, with a teacher serving like a tour guide, pointing out the things that they need to learn and grow and develop. But it's each individual that's choosing to do that work. And if you're doing that work, it's not possible for you to be misled. So if you have the original words of the Buddha, which you guys all have access to, you can study, examine, and investigate those, understanding them intellectually. You can reflect on them to independently verify them as being the truth, but then you can practice them and see the improvement to the condition of the mind in your life. But not everybody's doing that. So therefore, you'll see a vast array of misunderstandings of the teachings of the Buddha. And what I've done in this chapter is I've collected some of the more significant ones, and I've helped you to be able to see in a way that you can independently verify that these are indeed misunderstandings. It's important to keep in mind that what the Buddha was teaching you all through his life was to cultivate wisdom. That is through the cultivation of wisdom that's going to guide you to this enlightened mental state. You can't believe the teachings. So, what you're going to see me talking about as we get started here in a moment is certain rites and rituals and ceremonies and mystical and magical things that doesn't actually relate to the teachings of the Buddha at all. What he taught is awaken to these natural laws, that there's natural laws that are affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. And if you have a lack of wisdom of those natural laws, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions, which produce unwholesome results in your day to day life. So it's through awakening to the wisdom of these natural laws that you'll make wiser and wiser decisions and experience more and more improvements in your life. So the first thing I'm going to share with you is just to kind of help you understand the three main traditions or the main schools of Buddhist teachings that are considered to be Buddhism in the world. But keep in mind, there was only one Buddha, and there was what he taught, and that's what is the path to enlightenment. Any modifications or changes that have been made, that's not actually what the Buddha taught. In reality, we have over 200 different branches of Buddhist teachings out there in the world that people are considering what they're doing to be Buddhist. But there's three main schools that these things are coming from, or three main traditions. The first one is called Theravada Buddhism. The word Theravada means teachings of the elders. And this is considered to be the form of Buddhist teachings that is closest to what the Buddha taught during his lifetime. But even within this tradition, there's actually misunderstandings. You'll see that this particular tradition is hosted in South and Southeast Asia, places like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, southern Vietnam. These are like the focal points for this particular tradition. But in reality, this has been spread all throughout the world. And in this particular tradition, they consider the Pali Canon to be the original words of the Buddha. And it's called the Pali Canon because it's in the Pali language, which is no longer a spoken language today. It's 45 volumes of books that are this thick. And for here in Thailand, for the average person to have a copy of that, it would cost you about 3 months of your salary. And there's probably no book collections that you have that's valued at 3 months of your salary. So the average Thai person, the average temple, doesn't actually have access to the original words of the Buddha because it's just so costly to be printed out. That's why this book series, I titled it The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden, because these teachings have really been hidden for a long time. Not intentionally, but just because of the cost involved in printing out the teachings that have been essentially hidden. So the Pali Canon is considered to be the words of the Buddha, and people who are really interested in studying his teachings deeply and making their way to enlightenment would study his original words. But not everybody does that. I've been to over 200 temples in my lifetime, and I've only ever been to one that actually shares the original words of the Buddha. So you can see that that's less than 1%. So it's not really something that people are studying. And therefore, this is the reason why we see so many challenges in the world with people who are struggling with their day-to-day life and not understanding the teachings. And we might not see very many people getting to enlightenment. But for a community of people who are actually studying the original words of the Buddha, you'll see people getting to enlightenment and making their way to enlightenment, improving the condition of their mind. So this is the first tradition of the first school. It's called Theravada Buddhism. Some people refer to it as early Buddhism because it's considered to be the form of teachings that's closest to what the Buddha actually taught. But as I mentioned, there's even misunderstandings in this tradition. And the vast majority of what I'm going to share with you today are the misunderstandings from that tradition. Because if you're learning what I share and you show up to a temple and you start seeing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship and prayer, and you've heard from me that that's not what the Buddha taught, you might be, hold on a second, why did David say that when I show up to a temple and here's all these things that are actually happening exactly opposite of what David taught? And the reason why is because there's communities of people that are misunderstanding what the Buddha actually taught because they're not studying with his original words. Then about 500 to 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha, there's something called Mahayana Buddhism that comes along. Here, this is hosted primarily in East Asia, which is China. And there was a significant amount of changes that were made to the tradition that this Mahayana Buddhism spawned. And there's certain rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship that is talked about and practiced here, and even prayer and things of that nature. Then there's something called Vajrayana Buddhism, which is primarily hosted in Tibet, in Bhutan, Mongolia, and the Russian Republic of Kalmykia. And just like Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism have really spread all throughout the world. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, this comes about 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha. And you're going to see gross misunderstanding in this tradition because you're going to see tons of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship and prayer, deity worship, and things of this nature. And this just isn't what the Buddha taught in order to get to this enlightened mental state. So some people refer to these as the lesser vehicle, or Hinayana, being Theravada, or the greater vehicle, Mahayana, or the lightning fast vehicle, Vajrayana. So oftentimes when people are using the word Hinayana or lesser vehicle, this is like a way to degrade and denigrate the tradition of Theravada Buddhism, which I don't suggest you do. And for anybody that's talking about what they're doing in order to get to enlightenment as the greater vehicle or the lightning fast vehicle, then they're not understanding that getting to enlightenment is through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. They have misunderstood what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. It's not about getting there fast. It's about training your mind to gradually develop over the course of your life, and over a number of months and years, the mind gradually makes its way to enlightenment as you're moving this pollution out of the mind. So these are the main three traditions that you will see. But again, they can't all be what the Buddha taught because there was only one Buddha. And you'll see various offshoots of these throughout the world as well. This map that I have here, this is kind of just a map that I got off the internet. It doesn't actually show and replicate exactly the spread of Buddhism, but this little spot right here is where the Buddha originated. For example, we think that Buddhism came down to Sri Lanka, which is off the coast of India, and then it went by sea to Thailand. And it doesn't show that arrow here. So this is just kind of representative of how the teachings spread out throughout the world. And what you'll see is the farther and farther you get away from this focal point, the more the teachings have been changed and modified. And what I've been doing throughout the last 6.5 months is teaching you what are the teachings so that you can see that. But now what I'm going to share with you is what the teachings are not, so you can understand the misunderstandings. And this will, in effect, help you to be able to see the path more clearly of what the teachings of the Buddha are. And just like always, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section and ask those questions. Or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So the first three that I'm going to share with you are certain rites and rituals and ceremonies that exist in the world today that you will see that are misunderstandings of the teachings of the Buddha. This first one, we refer to it in Thai as Guatnam. We might refer to that in English as pouring water ceremony. What this is that if you make an offering to an ordained practitioner of some supplies, this is producing merit as you're practicing generosity. They might gesture to you to go get this little urn of water in this bowl, and then they're going to chant. And as they chant, you pour out this water. And what they're thinking and what they're believing is that whatever good deeds that you did there by making that offering to them, that you're transferring those benefits to somebody else, and that somebody else is going to enjoy the benefits of your good deeds. Well, if you understand the teachings of the Buddha and what he actually taught about the natural law of karma and generosity and these things, you understand that this is impossible, that you can't transfer the benefits of your good deeds to somebody else. It's kind of like mom or dad or uncles or aunts. Maybe they've done unwise things throughout their life and now they're dead or something like that. And now we're going to do a bunch of good things and transfer the benefit to them. This is like mystical and magical and rituals and ceremonies. Well, the benefit of practicing generosity and producing merit is that it's enhancing the quality of your mind. Because as you probably know, if you've been studying with me any amount of time, the underlying problem that the Buddha discovered, among others, is that the mind is craving and holding on and wanting things to be a certain way. And now the mind is experiencing discontentedness because it has wants and expectations, and the individuals or the world isn't meeting their expectations, wanting things to be a certain way. And the Buddha teaches you things like breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, as well as others, to train your mind to let go, to let go, to let go. So your practice of generosity to produce merit is training your mind to let go. It's enhancing the quality of your mind. And there's just no way that you can transfer that benefit to somebody else. Why, it's a really warm thought. It's a really warm idea to think that, oh, we can help these other people by doing good deeds and transfer things to them. It's a really warm thought, but it's just not possible. Not only can you understand that through generosity and that it's to enhance the quality of your mind, but if you think back to chapter 9, when we talked about the natural law of karma, you saw the words of the Buddha where he says, you are the owners of your karma, the heirs of your karma. Whatever you do, either wholesome or unwholesome, you are going to experience the consequences of that, essentially. That you can't produce karma for other people. And that's essentially what this ceremony is thinking and believing, is that somehow we can produce beneficial results or wholesome karma for other people. And it's just not possible for us to do that. So you might see this if you go into an environment where people are misunderstanding the teachings. And whether you choose to do this or not, of course, it's always your choice. It's your life. It's your choice. When I go places, sometimes people gesture for me to do this and I just smile and just, I'm usually with students and I don't actually go get it. So whether you choose to do this or not, it's up to you. But there will be situations where people will probably be practicing this kind of thing, and you'll understand what this is and why it's not from the actual Buddha. Then you'll see something perhaps called namon. This is a Thai word. We might translate this to blessed water. In certain big events, there might be ordained practitioners who are chanting during the event, and they will burn a candle and they will drip this candle into a bowl of water. And what they're thinking is that they're making this water to be sacred water. And now they take this device and they dip it in the water and they sprinkle it all over the people who are there. And the people think that if they get this water sprinkled on them, it's going to help them in some way and be beneficial for their life. This was actually practiced during the lifetime of the Buddha as well. And he talks about this and he explains how he doesn't do this. But nonetheless, people do it today. He didn't do it during his lifetime, and he gave the exact reasons why he doesn't do it. But nonetheless, people are actually doing this today. So there's nothing about a bowl of water that any human being can do to this bowl of water to make it special. This is going to come from the mind's conceit, from the mind's ego, to think that I, as an individual, can drip wax into a bowl of water and I can chant over that bowl of water and somehow make this bowl of water special or unique. And now, when I sprinkle it on people, it's going to somehow instantly benefit them. This is actually coming from the mind's conceit and the misunderstanding and the lack of wisdom of what it really takes to get to enlightenment, which is the cultivation of wisdom. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there were individuals called Brahmin, which were Hindu priests, and they were doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship and prayer. And the common individuals thought that they couldn't improve their life, that they needed to go to these Brahmin who were born into a certain family. This was a very strong caste system, and about 15% of society was a Brahmin. And if you were born into this family, you were considered to be holy. And these individuals were responsible for doing rites and rituals and ceremonies. And we were thinking, as the common person, that we would go to this person, pay them money, they would do a ceremony on our behalf, and then we were going to go home and our life was going to get better. Well, the Buddha understood that that wasn't the truth, and that's not the way an individual would improve their life and improve their mind. And he taught the actual path to enlightenment. And these Brahmin would sometimes come and learn with the Buddha. And this was one of the things that they were doing, was sprinkling water on people and things like this. So even though the Buddha taught the ordained practitioners during his lifetime what his teachings are and what it takes to get to enlightenment, because of that oral tradition and the vast misunderstandings that are propagated throughout the world, what we see is the ordained practitioners have actually become like the Brahmin, that individuals will go to a ordained practitioner, they will pay them a fee, and then they will perform certain rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, even prayer, and things like this. And the thought is that that person's going to go home and their life's going to get better. But it doesn't work that way, and their life just continues to have struggles and difficulties. And more people are seeing that this isn't working. And this is one of the ones that the Buddha talked about specifically, about how this promotes what we call wrong view. If you've studied with me for any period of time and you understand what right view is, you understand that right view is the Four Noble Truths, where you understand that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing your discontent feelings. And it's through the purification of your mind that's going to help you to be able to experience improved results in your day-to-day life. So there's nothing about sprinkling water on you that is going to help you to cultivate wisdom. There's just no way that that can occur. So the Buddha didn't do this. He taught his close students not to do it. People that were getting to enlightenment, they weren't doing this. But today you'll see people that are actually doing this. So if you see it, you'll understand what it is. And there's no benefit to it other than if you were hot on a hot day and you had some water splashed in your face, okay, there's probably some benefit to that. But in terms of getting to enlightenment and cultivating wisdom, there's just nothing there that's actually going to help you to accomplish that. Another thing that you might see when you're interacting with ordained practitioners is you might see something that we call sai sin. This is a Thai word that we might translate it to mean sacred thread. If you go and speak with an ordained practitioner, maybe at the end, they might tie this string on your wrist. And it's thought that this is a sacred thread and it's going to bring you good luck throughout the rest of your days. So people will oftentimes wear this for many weeks, even months, thinking that this string is going to somehow bring them good luck. But if you understand the teachings of the Buddha, you know that he didn't teach about good luck and bad luck, or destiny or fate, or that any being like a supreme being is controlling us, or that it's other people who are making us experience what we experience. He taught you to make wise decisions based on the natural law of Dhamma, of cause and effect, or action and result. And it's through our wise decision making that we experience wholesome results. So there's no amount of sacred thread that anybody could tie on your wrist that's going to produce wisdom for you to be able to make wiser decisions and actually experience improved results. If you go speak with an ordained practitioner and they provide wisdom to you and help you with wisdom that's going to guide you on the path, that's the beneficial thing that you're getting there. This string isn't actually benefiting you in any way. And I share these three things because I actually used to do these things, not while I was here in Thailand and teaching what I'm teaching now, but long in the past when I was in the USA and not understanding these teachings. I was teaching Thai massage. I used to do these kinds of things because I didn't know any better. And I knew and I learned that these things didn't lead to enlightenment and improvement to the condition of their mind. And it was important for me to be able to share these with other people so that you can see the truth for yourself. You can see all through the words of the Buddha where he's teaching you to cultivate wisdom. And you can see very clearly where he teaches that there isn't anything superstitious or auspicious about his teachings, that he didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, but those things came along after his death and people modified his teachings. So you'll see these things in certain environments and certain communities, and you might even see other things as well. Let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on these three, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Kristen or Ted has a question. Go ahead, guys.
Hi, teacher David, thank you. What about like the flowers and garlands and fruits and things that you see on altars? What is that about?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's a misunderstanding of his teachings. You're going to hear me talk in a moment about Buddha statues. And what people think is like the spirit of the Buddha is in these statues, and they're actually feeding the statue. They look at it as like the Buddha is sitting right there in front of them. And they will actually feed these statues and they'll put glasses of water there. And, of course, they're doing it in these outside places or places that is open air and things like that. And they'll put a glass of water there in the morning and then they'll come back in the afternoon and they'll see that the water has gone down. And they're like, oh, the Buddha must have drank the water. When in reality, it's just evaporation, right? The sun was hitting it, it just evaporated. But people just aren't understanding these kinds of things. So we'll talk about Buddha statues in a moment because there's things there that you would need to know and understand as well.
David, I could have sworn when I tied that white thread around my wrist that I was feeling enlightened, but no, I wasn't. We were susceptible to that as well in a giant ceremony in the Old Shrine Mine.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to find out everything about this. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you were feeling enlightened when you had that thread tied on you, I would encourage you to read chapter 3 again so you know more about what enlightenment is and what enlightenment is not. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to go to these next three. There's sometimes situations where ordained practitioners might choose to learn with me. So there's things that I help them to understand because there are certain aspects of their practice that is going to challenge them in being able to get to enlightenment. And I also teach you guys about how to interact with ordained practitioners as well. When you're around anybody, whether it's an ordained practitioner, whether it's your mom or dad, whether it's your friend or family or your coworker or the king of Thailand or anybody, I encourage you to treat everybody exactly the same. Treat everybody polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. Treat people the way that you're interested in being treated, with respect, right? That's the way that the Buddha taught. It's important to treat all beings with respect. So when you're around ordained practitioners and you're showing respect, and maybe here in Thailand, you might why them, where you bring your palms together. We do this not only towards the ordained practitioners, but towards everybody. This is like the gesture where, like in the West, we might shake somebody's hand. Here in Asia, a lot of places are whying. And you'll see this even in Western culture. It's making its way into Western culture. If you watch like an award show with celebrities and stuff like this, you'll oftentimes see them get up at the podium and they will why to people, showing appreciation, gratitude, and respect to the audience for giving them this award, perhaps. Well, if you why an ordained practitioner, if you show respect with your hands like this in the prayer like position and bowing your head, more likely than not, they're not going to why you back. And the reason why is because they've been taught that they are above us, that we are below them. And this is a big contrast and a conflict with the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha taught that everybody is equal. He didn't teach this pecking order, that there were certain people above us and certain people below us. That's what we have learned in the animal realm. And we needed that pecking order in the animal realm because that's what helped us to survive. Because we needed to know who was the matriarch of our elephant herd so she could show us where to eat, where the watering holes were, where the migration paths were. If we didn't know the pecking order in the animal world, we wouldn't have survived. But here in the human world, we don't need a pecking order. And when you're around individuals and you're whying and showing respect to them, particularly ordained practitioners, more likely than not, 99.99999% of the time, they are not going to why you back. And if you choose to why anybody, whether it's an ordained practitioner or anybody else, understand that the reason why you're choosing to do that is because that's your practice. You're choosing to be respectful, not because you want something back from that other person. So if you choose to why somebody, whether it's an ordained practitioner or anybody else, you shouldn't have an expectation that they will why you back. I'm just sharing this with you to help you understand that they will most likely not why you back. And you might ask me like, hey, David, what's going on here? I thought that we are supposed to all respect each other. Yeah, that's what the Buddha taught, is everybody to respect each other. But you see the natural law of karma at play, because individuals are sometimes having a very hard time to support their temple or support what they're doing as an ordained practitioner, because they're not showing that respect. They may be not saying thank you to the household practitioners for the support that they're getting from the household practitioners. And because of this, those individuals might be really struggling to support their temple and what it is that they're doing as an ordained practitioner. So I encourage you, as a practitioner of these teachings who's interested to get to enlightenment, to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody. And don't expect anything from anybody when you're whying somebody. Understand that that's part of your practice. But you will be in situations, not just with ordained practitioners, but even with household practitioners, that they might not why you back. But remember, you're not whying because you're expecting them to do something back for you. But instead, you're doing this because you understand it's a wise practice and it's producing wholesome karma for you. If there are any ordained practitioners who are learning with this right now, I would encourage you to be able to see the truth of what the Buddha taught, that he didn't teach that you are above other people. And while your teachers might be teaching you that you are above other people and that you shouldn't why household practitioners, keep in mind that it's the household practitioners that are creating that womb for you to live within. If it wasn't for the household practitioners providing you food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, you wouldn't be able to be an ordained practitioner. So for me, I have an enormous amount of respect and gratitude and appreciation for all the people who support me to be able to do what I do. And my way of showing that gratitude and respect is to teach them and guide them and help them to learn the path to enlightenment. And if somebody chooses to show me respect and chooses to why me, I'm going to definitely why them back, because that's my respect coming back to them. And if somebody chooses to hate me and be angry and vindictive towards me, my mind is unaffected by that too. So, as an ordained practitioner, while other people might be propping you up and thinking that you are above them, it's important for your mind to empty out any conceit and be able to see that you are not above other people. And you can see this in the words of the Buddha, where he taught this during his lifetime. This is a particular teaching from him titled Gain, Honor, and Praise Are an Obstacle Even for an Arahant. These are his words. He says, monks, gain honor and praise, I say, are an obstacle even for a monk who is an arahant, one with taints destroyed. An arahant is an enlightened being, and someone whose taints are destroyed is someone who's eliminated all the pollution out of their mind. So the Buddha is saying that gain honor and praise, people honoring you and respecting you and giving you this praise, is an obstacle for you. So this individual that the Buddha was talking to, Ananda, says, here the next part of this says, when this was said, the Venerable Ananda, which is one of the Buddha's closest students, asked the master teacher Gotama, why, Venerable Sir, are gain, honor, and praise an obstacle, even for a monk with taints destroyed? See, Ananda is actually really wise here. He's like, hold on a second. If an individual is an arahant, meaning they're enlightened, and their mind is purified, why would gain honor and praise be an obstacle for them? They're already enlightened. Their life should be at ease. Why is this the case? So the Buddha goes on and he teaches further. He says, I do not say, Ananda, that gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to his unshakable liberation of mind. So I didn't say that once they're enlightened, that gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle for them. But I say they are an obstacle to his attainment of those peaceful dwellings in this very life, which are achieved by one who resides diligent, dedicated, and determined. So dreadful, Ananda, are gain, honor, and praise, so bitter, vile, obstructive, to achieving the unsurpassed security from bondage or enlightenment. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves thus. We will abandon the arisen gain, honor, and praise, and we will not let the arisen gain, honor, and praise persist, obsessing our mind. Thus should you train yourselves. So what he's saying is that if you allow this gain, honor, and praise to obsess your mind, the conceit is going to rise up, and that's going to make it difficult for you to get to enlightenment. That's going to obstruct you from getting to enlightenment. So anytime somebody's trying to prop you up and give you this gain, honor, and praise, you're going to need to train your mind to not be affected by that, to allow the mind to be humble and down to earth. Because as you become more and more enlightened, as you cultivate more and more wisdom, you're going to get more and more and more people talking fondly of you. They're going to talk about how kind you are, how loving you are, how compassionate you are, how friendly you are, how respectful you are, how well spoken you are, because there's certain challenges that day-to-day people are going to be experiencing that for them it's very impactful, and it's very hard for them to be able to deal with whatever struggle or challenge, whatever difficulty they're having. But when you look at it, you're going to think that it's so straightforward because of the wisdom that you have. And if people ask for your advice and you help them, they're going to think that you're so wise and so smart. And you're going to start hearing all these compliments coming your way. So the more enlightened that you become, the more awake that you become as your mind is waking up to this wisdom and these natural laws, people are going to start laying on the praise pretty thick. And you're going to need to train your mind to be humble and down to earth and understand that you are just like everybody else. You've been fortunate to have exposure to these teachings that other people haven't had exposure to, but that doesn't make you a better person. That doesn't make you above them. That doesn't make you higher than them. So it's important for us to always keep that in mind. And it's important for an ordained practitioner to keep that in mind too, that as people are giving you this gain, honor, and praise, to stay humble and be thankful and respectful to the people who are actually providing you this womb to stay within. Because if it wasn't for the household practitioners, you wouldn't actually be able to be ordained, because they are the ones who are providing you that support. And if you're training your mind and developing your mind, cultivating wisdom, you will then have something to give back to them, which is the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment. Here's another teaching along these same lines from the Buddha, where he says this spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people. Monks, this spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people and persuading them, nor for the benefit of gain, honor, and praise, nor for the benefit of winning in debates, nor with the thought, let the people know me thus. But rather, this spiritual life is lived for the sake of restraint, for abandoning, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination. So what the Buddha is saying is that this spiritual life isn't lived in order to get this gain, honor, and praise from other people. Like, wow, look at him. He's practicing the Buddhist teachings. Wow, look at her. She's on the path to enlightenment. Wow, she's so holy. Like, raise the roof. Look at them. Like, that's not what this path is about. It's also not about going into discussions and like, let the people know me thus. Let the people know how smart I am so that I can win in this debate or this argument. That's not what the Buddha is teaching. He's teaching you to be humble, that the purpose of this path is to eliminate the strong feelings, to eliminate that discontentedness, restraining the mind and abandoning these pollutions of mind. So this is what the Buddha taught us, and it's important that we all practice this as part of our journey. But understand that other people, even if they're ordained, they may not be practicing the teachings. The Buddha actually gave an analogy or a story during his lifetime where he talks about himself as a cow and walking on the earth during rainy season, and he's leaving these footprints along the path, and that there's a donkey behind him putting their hooves in the same hoof prints as the cow. And the donkey is thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. And he says, just because the donkey is putting its hooves in the same hoof prints of a cow, and the donkey thinks in their mind that they are a cow, does that make the donkey a cow? Well, of course not, right? So just because someone shaves their hair and they wear orange robe, or just because they shave their hair and they wear white clothes, it doesn't mean they're practicing the teachings very closely. So as you navigate this world and you interact with different practitioners, whether they're ordained or they're a teacher, or they're sitting in front of a temple and teaching, understand that you need to have discernment about how you practice and how you take in information, that you always need to learn, examine, and investigate. You need to reflect on that to independently verify, and you need to practice in order to be able to see the truth for yourself. And while you might be practicing the teachings based on the original words of the Buddha, not everybody is. So as you practice, if you choose to be respectful to people, that's your practice without any expectation of anything in return from other people. And that's what's going to promote the improved qualities within your own mind. Then sometimes you're going to see chanting and mantras as part of people's community. Even us, we actually chant as well. Sometimes what you're going to hear people talk about with these chanting and mantra is they'll say that they have some kind of mystical or magical powers. Some people treat these as if they're prayers or even worship, but that's not how the Buddha actually introduced chanting, and that's not how he used it. The origins of chanting during the lifetime of the Buddha and the way that he used it was as a device to help people remember his teachings, because everything he taught was oral. So the way that they remembered his teachings is every 2 weeks, they would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. And this is what allowed them to commit it to their memory, and then they could actually practice his teachings. But nowadays, because the language that is being used during the mantras or the chanting, oftentimes people don't understand what that language is. It kind of takes on this mystical and magical approach. It's kind of like the least you know about something, the more magical it becomes, right? So as we've gotten farther and farther away from what these words mean, people are thinking that there's some kind of mystical or magical thing about them. That's why when I do the chanting, I put the English translation so you can see exactly what these things mean. And as I've shared with you, I think that these chants were actually created by the Buddha's students, either during his life or after his death, as a way of showing respect and gratitude and appreciation to him for having shared his teachings, because he didn't have any expectations of his students and he was just guiding them to this enlightened mental state. But you'll go places that they'll say, hey, we have this special chant in our temple. Don't tell anybody. Here's this special chant. If you chant it 10 times a day, you're going to get an extra long life. Or, you're going to get wealthy. Or your boyfriend or girlfriend's going to come back to you. Your husband or wife's going to come back to you if you chant this special chant. Well, I teach you not to believe me, and I teach you not to believe others as well. So when you're in those kinds of situations, don't believe anybody. If someone says, here, there's this special chant that is going to help you get this extra long life, well, look around the temple. Do you see people who are 150, 200, 300 years old? If so, there's some truth perhaps to that particular chant. But if you look around the temple and you don't see that, then you can understand that this isn't true. And keep this in mind too. If there was some chant that would instantly make you wealthy, or instantly make your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife come back to you for some reason, don't you think that would have spread like wildfire through humanity? I mean, think about it. You go to a restaurant and you have a good meal. How many people do you tell, right? You probably tell 3, 4, 5, 10 different people how great this restaurant was. So if there was a chant that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, and that chant is going to immediately produce some kind of benefit for you, that would have spread through humanity by now. We would all know what that chant is, right? So the Buddha taught cause and effect, or action and result. If you're going to become wealthy, that's going to come through your decisions of cause and effect. If you're having difficulties with your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, the way that you resolve that is through discussion and through making wise decisions. It's not through chanting. You can't sit in a room somewhere and chant and magically, poof, these things are going to happen for you. So you might see these kinds of things being talked about in different venues. Then some places you're going to see Buddhist statues where there's all different types of Buddhist statues all over the world. And they're really beautiful and amazing artwork that people have contributed to the world to be able to produce these kinds of artwork. But it's important to understand that the vast majority of these statues, they don't actually look like the Buddha himself. That statue making came about 200 or 300 years after the death of the Buddha. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he never taught anybody to make statues of him. But 200 or 300 years after his death, the people that were practicing his teachings, or at least they knew about him, at least to a certain degree, they came in contact with the Greek people. The people in Greece were making statues of their gods and the gods they believed in. So they kind of looked at each other and they were like, well, who do we have to make a statue out of? Because they learned the statue making from the Greek people. So they started making statues of the Buddha. And none of those people lived during the lifetime of the Buddha, so they didn't actually know what he looked like. So they just kind of casted these statues based on what they thought that he might look like. So the vast majority of the statues that you see, they actually aren't what the Buddha looks like. You'll actually see with this very flamboyant clothing on typically. You'll see this crown on top of his head looking very royal. The Buddha didn't dress like that. If you go to China, the statues look very Chinese. If you go to Japan, they look very Japanese. If you come to Thailand, some people say the statues look very Thai. So it's important to understand that they don't represent what the Buddha actually looked like and what he wore during his lifetime. But these are artistic representations of what people are thinking and what they've been doing over all these different years. And some people think that the spirit of the Buddha is in these statues and that they need to feed these statues and worship these statues and pray to these statues. And none of that is actually going to help them to get to enlightenment. That's not part of what the path to enlightenment is. You might appreciate these statues with the idea of artwork, but you can also appreciate them because oftentimes they're capturing a period of time in the life of the Buddha. Whereas if you understand his life story and you look at a statue, you'll actually understand the time frame in his life that they're trying to depict. So from that standpoint, it could actually potentially be interesting to look at these statues, but just understand that he never taught to make statues of him. He didn't teach that his spirit is in those statues. He didn't teach to worship or pray to those statues. Those things are actually not going to get you closer to enlightenment. They're actually taking you away from the path to enlightenment. So you might see these kinds of things around in various places related to the statues. And what the Buddha looked like is this picture that I have here. In the teachings of the Buddha, you can see where he describes himself. There's a period of time where somebody asked him about his physical appearance, and he walked through step by step explaining his physical appearance. And there was an artist here in Thailand that took that and actually did this artwork based on what they discovered that he would appear like during his lifetime. The Buddha originated in the region of the world that we refer to as Nepal or Northeast India. And here you can see a Thai artist has depicted an individual that looks like from that region of the world. And I know that this picture to be accurate to what the Buddha looked like during his lifetime. So the Buddha looked human, and it's very important to humanize a Buddha. If we elevate the Buddha and make these elaborate statues of him, then people tend to prop him up so high that you might think that you yourself can't get to enlightenment, that it's only him that can get to enlightenment, that he's different than you for some reason. But for me, I like to humanize a Buddha. I like for people to be able to see that a Buddha is a human being just like you and I. And just like they got to enlightenment, this Buddha got to enlightenment, you can get to enlightenment too. It's just a matter of you learning and growing and developing, understanding the wisdom that it took for him to get to enlightenment. And that's what's going to help you get to enlightenment. Also, the Buddha didn't wear elaborate clothing during his lifetime. He wore very simple rag robes, like you see here depicted in the image. There's actually a story from the lifetime of the Buddha where a student gave him a very rich, very fancy, very elaborate fabric. And he accepted that because he teaches to accept generosity when somebody makes you an offering. Then he turned to one of his students and he asked them to rip it up into shreds and sew it back together and then make a robe for him, because he wasn't interested in walking around the world with fancy, elaborate clothing. So the Buddha didn't wear the fancy clothing that you will oftentimes see depicted in some of these statues. So it's important for you to keep in mind that these kinds of things, because when you're around statues, people will treat them almost like the Buddha is really literally sitting there, and they might even be worshiping or feeding these statues. And it's helpful for you to understand where that's coming from. It's just a big misunderstanding about his teachings and what would actually lead to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions about any of these three that I've just shared? Okay, Kristen or Ted has a question.
David, this is a little off the beaten path, but I have a friend who, a very good friend, who is on his own journey with I believe, a Tibetan monastery in Connecticut, and he shares a little bit with me because he knows that I'm trying to learn the path as well. But he shares about a lot of ceremonies and for instance, the abbot, which I just had to look up, is coming to will be present at the monastery this weekend, and he received a certificate after completing something there, and it just raises up in me. I so badly want to share what I'm learning here as opposed to what the path that he's on. And I think the intention is good, but it's probably corrupt with a lot of shortcomings, for lack of a better term, on my behalf. Because I want to share this very good thing, and this very, in my eyes, it's very raw and to the point and no fluff, and Yeah, so I don't know if I'm getting my point across clearly, but I really want to say, hey, check out these videos at the very least. And on Sundays, at 10 o'clock our time, we sign on. But he hasn't asked for that. So, there's the conundrum for me.
Yeah, you're not interested in giving unsolicited guidance, but you can ask maybe once. You can say to him, are you interested in any resources that I'm using in order to understand the teachings of the Buddha? And they're going to say either yes or no. And if they say yes, you might send the book or send one video or something like that, and then just let it be. But if they say no, which you need to be prepared for that because of impermanence, then just understand that that's where they're at in their journey and just let it be. If this individual is sharing with you in an unsolicited way, then just understand that where that's coming from is that individual's conceit. And if I was you, I would just ignore those things because otherwise you're just going to get bombarded with all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Alberto has a question.
Yes, hi David, hi everyone. I have two questions regarding chantings. So the first one is, David, do you ever use or do you know any teacher or ajahn that uses chanting in languages other than Pali to help students memorize the teachings? And second question is that, since I've been studying with you, I've noticed that you tend to use the same chanting all the time. On the other hand, I've known some people who use different chantings, for instance, for each of the Brahma Maharas. And so my question is, what do you think are the benefits of keeping with one chanting versus having different verses depending on, the intention that you have for your meditation session? Thank you.
Sure. Pleased to help you with that, Alberto. So it's important to understand that chanting isn't required in order to get to enlightenment. Nowadays, you could actually choose not to chant at all, and you would still be able to make your way to enlightenment. That's why the core path, the Eightfold Path, it doesn't say right chanting. During the lifetime of the Buddha, you had to chant in order to be able to get to enlightenment because that was their only way to commit the teachings to memory, where nowadays we have books and videos and podcasts and audiobooks and things like this that can help you to study and commit the teachings to memory that way. So there's no amount of chanting that is required in order to get to enlightenment. I use it for the reasons that I teach as part of this program that helps you to cultivate the mind and ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation, and then other purposes as well. So I just use those three basic chants because those are the ones you're going to hear most frequently. Whenever you go to a Theravada temple, you're going to hear they're chanting those regularly. So you could chant right along with the people who are chanting if that's what you choose to do. But there's some students who learn with me who choose not to chant, and they would still be able to get to enlightenment that way too. I have heard other people in the Theravada tradition, they will chant in English. Some places they'll chant in Pali as well, but they're not doing it in order to commit the teachings to memory. It's almost just kind of like singy-songy in order to kind of like sing together as a group or as a community. If you get into the Mahayana and Vajrayana tradition, they will chant in Chinese, they will chant in Vietnamese or any of these other languages. In Theravada Buddhism, it's really rare amongst this tradition that this particular tradition chants in the Pali language. Where like if you were learning Mahayana tradition in China, you would need to first learn Chinese and then you could chant with them. Or if you were learning Mahayana Buddhism in Vietnam, you would need to first learn Vietnamese, then you could chant with them in Vietnamese. Where there's this unifying language in the Theravada tradition, which is the Pali language that we all chant in. There's different dialects from temple to temple, from region to region, but by and large, you could all chant together and everybody would be able to hear it. So I don't have any other chants that I use other than these three. And even though for many years I chanted on the way into meditation, on the way out, because that's what benefited me and that really helped me to be able to experience what I'm experiencing today. Nowadays, I only chant when I'm actually with students. Every once in a while, I'll chant by myself, but I'm talking so much nowadays that I started losing my voice. Early on, when I first started teaching, I was still chanting and doing meditation, but now I'm teaching so much and using my voice so much that I'm preserving it, that when I do meditation, I actually don't chant going into meditation unless I'm with students. But now my mind is to the point where I can just boom, I can sit down and go into meditation, no problem whatsoever. Where when I first started, I needed that chanting in order to ease into meditation, actually get the benefit out of meditation. So that's why I actually teach it for the students so that they can benefit from that practice and they'll be able to see that that's what that's there for. So I think I got all your questions there, Alberto. If there's something I missed, you can ask some more questions. Just let me know. Okay, it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
It's actually not a question, Teacher David. I was just going to offer that if there was ever a time that you would like, help doing the chanting, I don't mind starting the chanting at the beginning of meditations for you to give your voice a rest if need be.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, let me see if we have anything. I don't see anything anywhere else. All right. So I'm going to now move to the last three as part of this chapter of Misunderstandings of Gotama Buddha's Teachings. So the seventh one that I talk about here is that in some places, people consider Gotama Buddha to be a god, an avatar, or a lord. And the Buddha never described himself that way. So it's important that we don't think of the Buddha in that way as well. If we thought of the Buddha that way, that would be part of our own mind's misunderstanding of what the Buddha actually was. He was a human being. He was an individual who got to enlightenment by himself. He dedicated his life to sharing his teachings, helping countless people get to enlightenment, and he preserved his teachings so that other people could get to enlightenment as well. He was a human being. And as I was mentioning, it's important to humanize a Buddha so that you can understand that he's just like you or I, and that you can get to enlightenment just like he did. And if we understand a God being a formless being, that's not what the Buddha is, because the Buddha came into the world through the womb of a human woman. And an individual who comes into the world through the womb of a human woman, we consider that person to be a human being. So the Buddha wasn't a god. Although people look at him in very high regard, it's important that we make sure we understand that he was a human being and he was able to train his mind to get to this enlightened mental state, and you can too. Sometimes people refer to the Buddha as Lord Buddha, and whether you choose to do that or not is up to you, but you might hear this from certain people referring to him as Lord Buddha. If you look up the word Lord and what this means, it means someone or something having power, authority, or influence, a master or a ruler. Or what Lord also means is to act in a superior or domineering manner towards someone. And if you understand the teachings of the Buddha and what he did during his lifetime, that's exactly opposite of what the Buddha actually did. So if we assign this word Lord to Buddha and we call him Lord Buddha, we're assigning these qualities to him, when in reality that he actually never described himself as a Lord. But nowadays, there's some people who refer to him that way. And there's communities of people, well over 1 billion people in the world, that consider Jesus Christ to be the only Lord and Savior. And if we called Gautama Buddha or the Buddha Lord Buddha, right away, those people would choose that they would never be interested in learning the teachings of the Buddha. When the teachings of the Buddha are actually complementary to what an individual is learning through Jesus Christ's teachings, they could actually learn the teachings of the Buddha, understand how to get to enlightenment, which a Christian would probably refer to as the Holy Spirit, but they wouldn't be able to get access to those teachings or think that they could even approach those teachings if we refer to the Buddha as Lord Buddha, because they think of Jesus Christ as the only Lord and Savior. And if we refer to the Buddha as Lord Buddha, right away they would discount his teachings and they would be disinterested in learning and practicing his teachings. And these teachings could help hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands and tens of thousands and billions of people. These teachings could be shared all throughout the world. So in my opinion, it's best to not refer to the Buddha as a god, an avatar, or a lord, because the Buddha wasn't a god. He was a human being. He wasn't an avatar. He wasn't a lord. He didn't have these qualities that are associated with the Lord. And this will keep things open within the world for more and more people to be able to approach his teachings and actually get benefit out of his teachings. But again, what you choose to do is up to you and how you choose to refer to the Buddha. Sometimes you might hear people talk about blessings. They might say, oh, may the Buddha bless you, or may the triple gem bless you. If you look at the meaning for the word blessing, it means God's favor and protection. a prayer asking for God's favor and protection. So if you understand the teachings of the Buddha, you understand that that's not what the Buddha taught. He taught you to cultivate wisdom and make wise decisions. That's what's going to lead to an improvement in your mind and in your day-to-day life. So when you hear people talking about those kinds of things, they're just misunderstanding his teachings. And if you don't know what the triple gem is, let me know and I'll explain to you guys what that is, because people are oftentimes saying, may the triple gem bless you, or may the Lord Buddha bless you. And oftentimes these are people that are coming from Christianity into Buddhism, or they're coming from Hinduism into Buddhism or some other tradition, and they're assigning those same things that they learn in those traditions to the Buddha, and they're just not understanding. So now you can understand that there's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that's about a blessing. And once again, if you can think about, if I as a human being thought that I could say or do something that is going to bless you, this comes from the mind's ego, from the conceit of the mind, right? What makes me so special that I could actually bless another human being? It doesn't matter who you are in the world or what position you hold. If I think that I can bless another person, meaning that I can give you God's favor and protection just by way of me doing something for you, this comes from the mind's own ego. So I don't encourage you to think about what you do or what you're experiencing on this path as a blessing, because that's not what the Buddha actually taught. And then lastly, you'll hear some people will say that you are a Buddha, or you have Buddhahood, or you have Buddha nature. They think about everybody as being a Buddha. And this is a very big misunderstanding. If you understand what a Buddha is, which I've taught many times, and I've even shared it in this class, where a Buddha gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They preserve their teachings in such a way that countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. And that individual is very rare in the world. So while other people might say that everybody's a Buddha, the Buddha didn't say that. The Buddha didn't teach that. The Buddha taught just the opposite. He taught that it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. And I'll show you his actual words on this so you can see it yourself. This is a teaching that's titled The Rare Appearance of Five Treasures. And you can see the very first one. A Tathagata is an individual that is sharing the teachings. That is a Buddha. The Buddha himself referred to himself as a Tathagata. The word Tathagata means the one who shares the truth, or the one who discovers the truth. So he refers to himself as the Tathagata, an arahant, which means an enlightened being. A perfectly enlightened one is rare in the world, right? He's saying that very clearly right here. Well, if everybody was a Buddha, he wouldn't say that it was rare for a Tathagata to appear in the world. So this is a misunderstanding that people have about what a Buddha is and what the Buddha actually taught, because they're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, and they're not understanding what an actual Buddha is. You can see these other rare things that he talks about here, that a person who can teach the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata is rare in the world. When the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata has been taught, a person who can understand it is rare in the world. When the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata has been taught, a person who understands it and practice in accordance with the teachings is rare in the world. And a grateful and thankful person is rare in the world. The Buddha calls these the five treasures. So these are very rare things that occur in the world. The last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So you're not a Buddha. You're going to need help. You're going to need guidance along the path. But by you getting to enlightenment, you'll be plenty satisfied with that. You don't need to be a Buddha. Anybody who wants to be a Buddha, who's longing, yearning to be a Buddha, you can be sure that they're not a Buddha. A Buddha doesn't long and yearn to be a Buddha. They just are. And that's just what happens. That an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they actually have a certain quality of their mind that is unique than every other human being. The mind of a Buddha functions exactly the same as every other human being. So that's why what they did to be able to get to enlightenment is the same exact things that everybody else needs to do in order to be able to train their mind to get to enlightenment. But there's one aspect of the mind of a Buddha which makes them unique and able to actually get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And your mind doesn't have this quality. So your mind has a certain capacity. It's like a hard drive. A hard drive might have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte or something like this. And when that hard drive reaches its capacity, it needs to delete old files in order to store new files. And this is essentially what you've been doing throughout your life, is that because you have a certain limited capacity, when you are experiencing life, you probably remember the last 5 or 10 years of your life fairly well. But beyond that, you don't really have maybe much recall about what you've actually been doing in your day-to-day life. If you think back to your childhood, you might have spotty memories about what happened during your childhood. That's because you've had to delete those files in order to store these new files of the things that you're doing in the last 5 or 10 years or so. An individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. Even in the unenlightened state, they have an unlimited capacity to their mind to be able to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. Other individuals do have the ability to have residual memories of their past lives, but an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have direct recall of countless situations that they've been in their existing life, in their previous lives as well, and they accumulate wisdom throughout all of this period of time, multiple lifetimes, and they bring it all together in their last life to be able to help them get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's how they actually do it, is that they've been accumulating wisdom over multiple lifetimes. And that individual is very rare in the world. And having gotten to enlightenment and done all that work to get to enlightenment, they have an enormous amount of loving kindness and compassion for the entire world. They have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. They have concern for the misfortune of others. And because they struggled and were so challenged to get to enlightenment by themselves, that they are then interested in making it as easy as possible for other people to get to enlightenment. Because an individual who's a Buddha, they did a lot of work to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. It was one of the most challenging or the most challenging thing that they've ever experienced in their entire life. So having accomplished that enlightened mental state where their mind is completely peaceful and joyful, they have such loving kindness and compassion for the rest of the world. No matter what they were doing prior to enlightenment, they will drop all of that stuff, dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, helping countless people to be able to experience this enlightened mental state out of loving kindness and compassion for the entire world, making it as easy as possible for people. So they're going to lay down lights along the path, making it as clear as possible for people to be able to get to enlightenment. That's what a Buddha does during their lifetime. And then if the people choose to learn and practice those teachings, they can experience those same results as well. But they're not a Buddha at that point. They're an enlightened being. Or during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would refer to them as an arahant, somebody who's actually purified their mind. Where today we might just refer to this person as an enlightened being. They're in the 4th stage of enlightenment where they fully purified their mind of the 10 fetters or the 10 pollutions or the defilements or the taints. And that individual is an enlightened being, and they're going to be experiencing all the qualities that a Buddha is experiencing, except their mind doesn't have the same level of memorization and ability to remember things as a Buddha would. And a Buddha has other qualities as well, but an enlightened being is going to be purely satisfied with what they've accomplished in their lifetime. They just wouldn't be considered a Buddha at that point. So let me know what questions you have about any of these misunderstandings. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, it looks like maybe Kristen or Ted have a question. Go ahead, guys.
David, sorry for all the questions. So was it like a last minute realization? Because the Buddha actually was trying to decide on whether he was going to teach or not. It sounded like he contemplated that for a little while and then came to the conclusion that he would teach. But now it's just a given that if there is a Buddha on earth, that he will teach, he will share his teachings. So it's just, I know that we have learned that he took a little time and was wondering if the world was ready to hear the teachings or not. Am I mistaken on that?
No, what your memory is accurate that a Buddha is going to be very measured in their decision making, even an enlightened being, even a person getting to enlightenment. They're going to think through their decisions and make sure that they're making wise decisions. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, he understood at the age of 35 when he got to enlightenment that his teachings were radically different than what anybody was teaching at the time, and he was trying to decide whether the world was ready for what it was that he had to share with them. So he thought that through for 7 weeks and contemplating at the tree in Northeast India. And by the way, for those of you guys that don't know, we're going to be taking this trip to India and Nepal this year. You guys are welcome to go if you guys would like. You'll see the details on the website, or you can reach out to me, where we're going to visit all these different sites. But he stayed at this tree for 7 weeks contemplating whether or not he should share his teachings. And ultimately he decided to share his teachings, but it wasn't a last minute thought or anything like that. It was well thought out, because that's what a Buddha does. That's what an enlightened being does. Even someone who's getting to enlightenment, you're going to need to have what the Buddha calls well collected thought, or careful attention to all your decisions. Because if you understand the natural law of karma, you know that any decision you make, it's going to have certain consequences. There's going to be certain results because of it. So you would like to make sure that each decision you make is very wise. And then the more that you do that, you cultivate your wisdom to be able to just know what to make any particular decision at any time. So you get through a period of your practice where for multiple months and even years, you do what's called thinking and pondering, where you think very deeply about the situation that you're in, the teachings that you're aware of, and how to apply these. And you really kind of slowly walk through your life making careful decisions. But as you do that over a number of months and years, you cultivate more and more wisdom about wise decision making. And eventually the ability to make decisions becomes much easier because you have that wisdom on board. But you do go through this period of thinking and pondering about the teachings and deciding what it is that you should do at any given time. And then the other parts of your question there, Ted, is that yes, an individual who does become a Buddha, they are going to teach. That's what they choose to do out of this loving kindness and compassion for the entire world. And by the way, you apologize for asking multiple questions. If you're ever with a teacher who gets angry that you're asking questions, I encourage you to find a new teacher, because a teacher's role is to help their students. And if they're disheartened or upset or frustrated at students asking questions, that's, in my opinion, the wrong teacher to be studying with. Thumbs up, huh? Okay. All right. So here's Marcy. She's got some questions.
Thank you, Teacher David. My questions I thought were not going to really pertain to what's going on, but just prior to the last answering the question for Ted, this question kind of came up for me. I was in a situation where I was having a conversation with someone, and they kept asking for me to share things that this being Marcy has learned. But every time I attempted to share, they would cut me off. And I just decided at that point that the most beneficial thing that I could do was just to become silent and kind of just let them, go, and just kind of like not almost not in agreement, but just understand I heard everything that they were saying. And it came to a point where they were kind of like, well, why aren't you answering me? And I would, took a moment and I said, well, it appears that when I try to speak, you come in with more information, and I'm just really waiting for a moment when you become silent and allow me to kind of speak. And then I after I said that, I saw the arising of discontentedness in them, and it was like, so basically my question is at that point in time, my speech set up a condition or a situation for discontentedness to arise, right? So this is how I'm seeing this. So in that sense, where does my karma lie? Because I was trying to be very thoughtful and very, think through before my speech with them. And I was not, trying to place blame at all, but I could see that every time I would begin to speak, they would cut me off. And then, it was that situation. So that was kind of my concern. Like, where not only does my karma lie in this, but going forward, is there a little better way of handling this in a sense when somebody is asking for information, but they don't seem to be wanting to really receive it, without.
Yeah, so if you were practicing right speech, you're producing wholesome gamma. But just because you're practicing right speech doesn't mean that someone's going to receive that speech well. Because the right speech provides the best opportunity for somebody to receive it well. But if somebody's mind has craving, desire, attachment in their mind, they could see what you're saying is disagreeable because you didn't cause their discontentedness. It's their own mind that caused that. So even when you're practicing right speech 100% perfectly, it's still possible for people to become discontent around you because you're not the one causing their discontentedness. It's their own mind. So I could give you example after example. Like for me, 99.9999% of the time, nobody's discontent around me. But every once in a while, there's somebody who hears something I say. Like one day I was in class and I was teaching and someone asked me a question about the war. And I don't talk about politics and these kinds of things. But one of the things I said it's very unfortunate that there is a war in the world. And there was 2 wars at that time. I said that there's wars in the world. And this student got so upset, not the one that I was talking to, but a different student, got so upset that I said that it was unfortunate that there was a war in the world. They thought that that was just like so disrespectful to say something like that. And they blamed me for allowing the war to continue. They said it's people like you that talk like that allow the war to continue. So even when you just say things like, oh, it's unfortunate there's these wars in the world, and then I just taught whatever I taught, that triggered a certain craving in their mind. They thought that I should be out on the street with picket signs, beating drums, degrading and denouncing the war about how horrible it is. And just by saying that it's unfortunate, that wasn't strong enough language for this person. They wanted me to be bitter and harsh and hostile about the war and vindictive and gossiping and slandering. And that's just not the way that I function. So your words, even with right speech, aren't going to meet the expectations that somebody else has sometimes, and they're going to become discontent. And as long as you're practicing right speech in that situation, there's no unwholesome karma for you. If they become angry, that's not your unwholesome karma. That's a choice that they're making. That's their unwholesome karma because they allowed craving to exist in their mind. So now they're experiencing the results of that. And in that situation, I would just walk away. So what you said was fine. I even say this sometimes too. There was a class I taught 2 weeks ago where there were 2 students that were actually kept interrupting me during break times. They would ask me questions and they kept interrupting me over the course of 2 days. And finally, after about the 4th or 5th time over 2 days, I said to them, if you guys came here to learn, you're going to need to allow me to speak so that you can hear what I have to share so that you can actually learn. And I could tell they didn't like that whatsoever. And then I didn't see them after that, right? Like they left that day and they didn't come back. And that was okay because that's what they needed to learn in that situation. And I said it very lovingly, very kindly, very thoughtfully. I didn't do it on the first time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. But if these people were going to learn anything, they were going to need to understand. And one of the things they needed to learn was you need to let people talk and then you can actually learn. So people are going to be displeased with what you say sometimes. And if you're not attached to other people always being peaceful and joyful around you, then when people are discontent, you'll just understand that they're causing their own discontentedness, but you're practicing in a way that provides the least opportunity for them to become discontent.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question, Teacher David, is about showing signs of affection. So I've noticed that the mind now has come to a realization where there's contact through my animals, right? And before I would just kind of be like, oh, that's contact, nothing, and not kind of feed into it. But now I'm starting to feel where I notice like the puppy will come up in my lap and then I kind of want to give him a little hug, a little squeeze, a little kiss. So my question is that level of like contact and affection, I know that there's central desire, there. As a person progresses to enlightenment, will they still show those signs of contact and affection? Or is that something that will just kind of dissipate?
No, they can still do those things, but they're not doing it out of sensual desire. You can
Okay.
hug, you can kiss your dog and rub their nose or whatever else you do out of affection, this is an action that's coming from your loving kindness and your compassion for them. It doesn't have to come from sensual desire. If there is sensual desire there, you can train your mind to get rid of that, where like someday you're not going to be able to do that with that dog and you're going to need to be comfortable with that. Right now you might not be in that place, but you can get to a point where you can hug people and do these kinds of things and it not come from sensual desire. You just need to train your mind to do that. So like, for example, I used to, when my wife would come home from work a long time ago, I used to always want to hug her as soon as she came in from work. And I thought that that was a sign of our love, that as soon as she would come home, there was an embrace and that was an acknowledgement of our love. And then when she didn't hug me when she came home, I felt like there was something wrong, right? And this was me craving permanence, where what I came to understand is that hug doesn't signify whether we love each other and whether we're having a good relationship or not. It's just an act of affection. And you can train your mind that you can do that, and that's fine. And you can train your mind when that doesn't happen, you're not discontent. And that's where you know that your sensual desire is gone in regards to that. Because if you hug them or you don't hug them, you can completely stay content and peaceful. Whereas if you hug them, you get happy or excited. And if you don't hug them, you get frustrated or angry, then you know there's some sensual desire there. So it's not about the act of hugging, it's about what the mind is doing when it's either having the hug or not having the hug. Yeah, you're welcome. Pleased to help you, Marcy. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining for today's class and let you know that next week I'm going to be in the next section of this book, which is frequently asked questions. You're going to see 11 individual frequently asked questions that students ask me, and they're kind of just miscellaneous random questions that didn't fit into any of the chapters anywhere. And I just kind of put them in the back of the book for students to be able to get answers to those questions. So we're going to go through all 11 of those next week so that you guys can learn about that. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be starting a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course, which I teach every month, the first full week of each month. It's going to start at 9 a.m. Thai time to 3 p.m. Thai time, and we take our hour-and-a-half lunch break. So I teach it here in Chiang Mai, but of course I live stream it as well. So for those of you guys that would like to learn any of that content, that's going to be available to you. And it's also available through the recordings as well. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we're going to be doing our meditation together, and I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. I'd like to also make sure you understand that we're going to be restarting this program from the very beginning on the 1st of June. That's the first Sunday of June. So if you would like to start this program over from the very beginning, I'm going to be starting it over on that day. And if you have friends or family that are interested in starting, they can start on that day as well. You'll see all the details on our website for the group learning program under the online learning section. So we're going to be starting from the very beginning and going all the way back through for 7 months of the entire program. So you might decide to start this program again and do it again for some people, or some people might decide to move into the Pali Canon and English Study Group, which is on Saturday. That restarts in January of next year, but you don't have to start the Pali Canon and English Study Group at the very beginning. You can actually join it at any time, just like this program too. You can join it at any time. But for anybody who would like to go through the group learning program again, it ends on December 31st. And then like 10 days later, the Pali Canon and English Study Group starts. So it's like a perfect transition into the Pali Canon and English Study Group for anybody who would like to study that again. So any of these classes, courses, or retreats that you'd like to attend, I'm here to help you. And feel free to reach out to me either in classes or privately. I'm always pleased to be able to help you in your journey to enlightenment. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice these teachings. And as you need help, feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help you. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care and be well. Sawadee-ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.